Welcome to Amanda's Book Corner. I'm Amanda, and in this video I'll be reviewing two books, both part of the Hollow Crown duology. First is Incendiary, and second is Illusionary, both by Zoraida Córdova. So Incendiary came out in spring 2020, and I got it sometime a few months after that, and I was actually really excited to read it. I actually had planned to read it last year, and somehow that didn't happen. I don't really remember why. But the reason I picked up Incendiary is primarily because it's set in Spain, or rather it's set in a fantasy world inspired by Spain to some degree. And Spain is my favorite country, so I'm always excited to read any book that's set in Spain. So as I mentioned, this is a fantasy world inspired by Spain. So this might be the most high fantasy book that I've read thus far in my reading life. I've only started getting into fantasy at all in the last few years, and I think so far the fantasy that I have read has been a little bit lighter in that it's more of like a realistic world with some fantasy elements. With Incendiary, the fantasy plays a much larger role in the book. And for that reason, this actually took me a little while to get into, which I was surprised about. Normally when I start reading a book, it can take me anywhere from 50 to 100 pages to really get absorbed into the book. And I know that about myself. I know that it just takes me time to really get invested in something. And that's why I don't really ever DNF a book until I've reached at least that 50 to 100 page mark. With Incendiary, for whatever reason, I had already passed that and I still just wasn't completely absorbed into it. And I think for me, that's because I'm just so new to the fantasy genre, especially the kind of more high fantasy with like world building and stuff. So with this book, there is a lot of backstory, a lot of world building, a lot of establishing of the different kinds of magics and the history of their kingdom, Puerto Leones. Because of that, I think it took more brain power on my part to understand what was happening. For the first several chapters, I just felt that it took so much of my mental energy and attention that reading more than like a chapter or two just made me feel sleepy. Not in a bad way though, I was enjoying it, I was interested, but it just took some time for me to really get it, I guess. Another thing happened probably about 100 pages, maybe less, maybe like 75 pages into the book. There was an event that happened. I'm not going to tell you what because it's major spoilers, especially when you find out other stuff later on. But anyway, an event happened that really upset me, and so I actually had to like put the book down for a few days because I was so distraught by what happened that I just could not continue. Eventually my curiosity got the better of me and I was like, I need to keep going. And finally, everything kind of clicked for me at a certain point. After the main character, Renata, I haven't even told you what the summary of this book is. I'm sorry. Okay, let me back up a little bit. So the summary of this book is, Renata is a young woman, she's a teenager, who, there's a few different kinds of magic, but she's a robari, which is someone who can steal someone's memories from them. But not only is she stealing the memory, so they no longer have the memory, she also is able to retain the memory in her own mind. And she was weaponized by the kingdom. They used her to steal people's memories and turn them into hollows. Hollows are people that essentially have no memories left in their brain. They're essentially dead on the inside. Eventually, she escaped from them and joined the Moria. Her people are the Moria, people with magic. And she joined the Whispers, who are people who are trying to overthrow the evil kingdom that is demonizing people with magics, the Moria, and essentially trying to drive them out of the country. This book has a lot of parallels with the Spanish Inquisition, but of course, instead of driving out Muslims and Jews, it's the kingdom, which is non-magic people, driving out people with magic. Early on, the Whispers find out that the people in power have a way to cure Moria of their magics, as in strip them of their magics. So Renata is on a mission to go to the castle and find this device that they have and destroy it so that they can't strip the magics away from all of her people. But early on, this also kind of becomes a sort of revenge mission as well. So it took me until Renata was in the castle working on her mission before I really got fully invested into the story. And I don't know why it took me that long. It took me probably 150 pages to really get absorbed into the book, but once I did, I was fully absorbed. So don't let my early lackluster feelings deter you, because that's just on me not being familiar with fantasy, but I actually really love this book after that. What I like about this book is, first of all, I really like Renata as a character, and I like seeing how she works through her different feelings of guilt and shame, and also her need to prove herself, and to kind of prove herself not only to herself but also to her fellow Whispers. Many of the people that she works with in the Whispers, they don't trust her, they don't like her, and she just seems very isolated a lot of the time, and I really feel bad for her. But although they also have magics of their own, they very much distrust her as a Robari and as someone who has created so many hollows in her brief time that she lived at the castle when she was younger. I like how the story keeps changing pace a lot too. So it starts off with Renata and her fellow Whispers in the forest, and it feels like they're on like a mission together, but then it kind of shifts into something that's more of a solo mission. It moves into the castle and introduces new characters, and it really plays with who you can trust or can't trust. There are people like the guy who makes sure Renata looks presentable. His name is Leonardo. He's a character that seems charming, but is he hiding something? And then there's this woman who was previously engaged to the Prince Castellan, who I'll talk about in a moment. So her name is Lady Nuria, and she's another person who, she's not like the other upper class women in this area. She seems different, but again, can you trust her or can you not trust her? Meanwhile, while Renata is in the castle, she's starting to realize just how much she doesn't actually remember, or rather the memories that she doesn't seem to have access to. So as I mentioned, she steals people's memories, but she has so many memories trapped in her brain that her mind has kind of created what she calls the gray, which is a space that she can't really access where a lot of these memories go. And so that's not just memories that she's stolen, it's also memories from her own life that she just doesn't have access to. She can't really remember a lot of things. And while she's in the castle, she's starting to realize that maybe the way she thought things have happened isn't exactly how they did happen. Maybe her impressions of people aren't necessarily accurate impressions. And there's a lot going on in this book. I mean, this first book is 450 pages, and so early on there's a lot of explaining the history and the magics and world building and all of that. But later on, it's a lot of shifting tone and a lot of changing the scenery and the characters that you're interacting with. And at least in my opinion, it really keeps you on your toes about what's going on, and you really wonder who you can and cannot trust. And I like that it stays pretty unexpected. So that's one thing I will say I really liked about this book. My favorite part of the book really is like the last 200 pages, the last 150 pages, something like that. It gets really exciting by that point, and it ends on a complete cliffhanger that involves Renata and her biggest enemy, Prince Castellan. And I don't know, I felt very intrigued by the ending, so I had to go in and read the sequel. So following Incendiary, I read its sequel, Illusionary. Here are the two books together. But I read Illusionary next, and I started it right after I finished the other one. So Illusionary picks up exactly where Incendiary left off. As much as I liked Incendiary, by the way, I gave that one 4 stars. As much as I like that one, I think Illusionary is actually a stronger book, and I enjoyed it a lot more. I think with Incendiary, there's a lot going on, and it felt a little bit heavy at times. But with Illusionary, I feel like it brings in some new elements that make it a quicker and more enjoyable read. So in contrast to Incendiary, Illusionary also has humor and romance, and I think more character growth, like really important character growth. And so those 3 additional elements really made this a much more fun read for me. And by the way, Illusionary really is a true sequel, so if you haven't read Incendiary, you might want to skip this portion of my video because it will probably have a lot of spoilers if you haven't read the first book first. So please skip ahead if you don't want to have any spoilers. Okay, so diving right into Illusionary. So right after that, Illusionary is following Renata and Prince Castellan, and they are strangely working together. First and foremost, they're trying to find Des. You might remember Des from the first book. He is alive, and they're trying to find him. That was a major spoiler, so I hope you have read Incendiary by this point. Anyway, so they're trying to find Des, and they're traveling across Puerto Leones, trying to find not only him, but also get to this device that will help them defeat the evil king and hopefully save the Moria and the kingdom. So I will say that this book starts off with much higher stakes, I think, than the first book. The first book, it took some time to really get into it. With Illusionary, the stakes are high from the very get-go. I really like the prologue, actually. The prologue focuses on King Fernando, and he is, well, first of all, he's questioning all the people who were at the event where things went down at the end of Incendiary, where he was nearly attacked, and then Renata saved him, and then Renata betrayed him, and they all escaped. All of that stuff. So King Fernando is definitely on a mission to find them, and he has found the perfect person to help carry out that mission. So already it feels exciting, and you're just like, oh, when is this? Something's going to go down. When is it going to happen? Meanwhile, Renata and Castellan, well, first of all, it kind of feels like a little romance, historical romance, and they have a few tropes. So, for example, they're doing like the fake married trope. I mean, this is historical. So they're traveling as if they're a married couple, but they're not, obviously. And of course, their hotel where they're staying, the inn where they're staying only has one bed, so there's the one bed trope. And it's interesting seeing these two who were enemies, but you're also finding out that they actually were previously friends as children. So they're friends/enemies who are kind of developing feelings for each other, but they're on a mission, so it's all very complicated. And I don't know, I was very much here for it. And early on, one of my favorite characters from Incendiary joins their group, Leonardo. So the three of them are traveling. Oh, by the way, there's a map in this one, which I really appreciated. But anyway, the three of them, they're traveling south so they can eventually get to Isla Sombras, which is where they will find the thing that they need to defeat King Fernando. The stakes are really high in this one, not only for the things I mentioned already, but also Renata is having some major issues with her mind and the gray, because apparently the gray is starting to fracture a little bit, and so memories are coming out, and she's having a harder time remembering what's real and what's not, and like what's her memory, what's someone else's memory, and she doesn't even always know where she is or who someone is, and it's really exciting. Did I mention that Castellan is also a Moria like they are? He's an Illusionary, so he's able to change his appearance, and so when he's presenting himself as someone else, she doesn't even recognize him, and it's just, oh, there's so much going on here, and it's really interesting. This book weaves in a lot of humor, as I mentioned. It's just really hilarious, and I think it's not only from the relationship between Renata and Castellan, but I think Leo also brings a lot of comic relief, and later on another character does too, but I don't want to mention too much because of spoilers. There's just a lot of fun going on, and it's like a little adventure, and there's pirates, and there's people that help him along the way, and you eventually get to see Des and kind of go through like the different feelings behind, like, you abandoned Renata, but maybe you still care for her, but maybe it's too late, maybe it's not too late, we don't know. There's just so much going on in this book. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of adventure, and finally I feel like Renata is starting to have a support group, which is something she didn't really have before. I mentioned before in Incendiary that the Whispers, that she's part of their group, but they don't really trust her. And in fact, some of them betrayed her by the end of Incendiary. But here, I like that Renata has people with her who choose to be with her, and they do care about her, and they do respect her and trust her and love her. And I really like that she has this support group that she never had before. It's kind of like a found family sort of thing. And so while she's going through this really difficult situation with her mind and the gray, at least she has people around her that she can rely on during this difficult time. And don't forget that they're still fighting this war on a few different fronts. And there's a lot of danger and, backstabbers and people that you think you can trust, who you think are on your side, but maybe they're not on your side. So it's very exciting. So yeah, I flew through this book. I really loved it. I told you that Incendiary was a 4-star read for me. Illusionary is a 5-star read for me. I love this book. This is one of my 2 favorite books I read this month, so I'm really happy I read it. And that wraps up my review. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell to get all of my latest videos. You can also find the links to read my full written review on my blog and on Goodreads in the description below. You'll also find the links for all my social channels. I'm currently on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'll be publishing reviews for all the books I read, so at least once or twice a week you'll see new videos on my channel. So keep checking back for more, and I hope to see you there.